Autoline Daily is brought to you by Siemens PLM Software, transforming the process of innovation.
Here are today's top headlines. Taiwan figures out a way to boost new car sales. Adesa says used car sales are picking up. And JP Morgan says GM's going to have to use the threat of bankruptcy. Up next, we'll be back with the news behind the headlines. This is Autoline Daily for Friday, January 30, 2009, and now the news. And it's good news. Car sales are off to a rip-roaring start in 2009 in Taiwan. Wards reports that deliveries of imported new vehicles increased 58% compared to December and 44% over last January. The Taiwanese government initiated a tax credit to spur sales, and I think we're going to hear calls to do the same sort of thing in other countries. Bailing out the car companies will only work if car sales get going, and tax credits to buy new cars may be just the ticket. And there's good news coming out of the used car market. Adesa, the second largest auction house in the U.S., says that it's seeing used car sales rising. And remember, they sell to dealers. Auto Remarketing has an interview with Adesa executives in which they say the worst is over, the recovery is not that far away, and they predict 2009 will exceed historic expectations. And man, I hope those guys are right. But okay, now back to reality. JP Morgan says General Motors will have to revive the threat of bankruptcy to get bondholders to agree to a deal, the Detroit Free Press reports. As we reported earlier this week, PIMCO walked out on discussions with GM to take stock in lieu of cash for its bond payments. JP Morgan predicts bondholders will have to take 35% of their holdings in stock and that they'll end up owning 20% of General Motors. But that's not the worst of it. That debt swapped for equity could be considered income for tax purposes. And the Detroit News reports GM is lobbying Congress to avoid a tax bill that could come to $7 billion. Essentially, GM would be using a big chunk of the federal loans to pay income taxes, which puts the company right back where it started. And I don't want to sound like we're piling on GM, but WardsAuto.com reports Saturn is going to drop the Astra by the end of this model year. And Saturn is ending its long-standing 30-day return policy, and it's cutting back on production of the View 2-mode hybrid. You know, there's talk that GM's getting ready to bury this brand, and this will only fuel those rumors. Tough love for the supplier industry. The Free Press reports Ford will not provide any aid to its main supplier, Visteon, despite its struggles and the breakdown that would occur in the supply chain should it fail. In the past, Ford helped Visteon out by taking over plants it was unable to sell, hired back workers, and helped pay retiree benefits. Now it looks like Visteon is on its own. Coming up next, a preview of Autoline Detroit and this week's Trivia Prize winner. We'll be back right after this.
Siemens, transforming the process of innovation.
On this episode of Autoline Detroit, I'm joined by two industry insiders, Paul Eisenstein from the Detroit Bureau and John DeCicco from the Environmental Defense Fund. We talk all about the proposed California emission standards and what that means for the industry. In the following short preview, we discuss the electrification of the automobile and the impact that could have on CO2 emissions.
60% of our electricity still comes from coal. But the fact of the matter is if you substitute a gasoline mile with an electric mile, taking the average gasoline we get in this country from petroleum and the average electricity we get from our generation mix, 60% coal, you do cut CO2 emissions roughly in half. So I don't think there's a question, certainly for North America and Europe, where we have reasonable controls on the power plants, and therefore you minimize the problem with the acid rain and the smog part of the power plants, that for the CO2, which is the real big problem we face, that electrification is a good thing. The reason someone like myself and my organization falls short of, say, being just out-and-out boosters, let's just push electrics, is it is very costly still. And there's still a lot of questions about the battery. And it's not necessarily the most cost-effective way to cut that pollution right now. We think we ought to let the market evolve, and I think the value is going to be driven by a lot of other factors in addition to the environment.
If you want to hear the rest of my interview, you can watch the entire episode of Autoline Detroit on our website right now. And that's it for today's top news in the global automotive industry. But before we go, I've got the winner of this week's trivia contest. Akio Toyoda was recently named president of Toyota. He's related to the original founder of the company, and we challenged you to tell us how. Is he the son, grandson, or great-grandson of company founder Kiichiro Toyota? And the correct answer is, he's the grandson. So as always, my crack team has randomly selected today's winner from the pool of correct responses. Pookie, the envelope, please.
Ooh.
Pookie, what's with the purse? Oh, you're setting an example to Wall Street and giving your bonus back. Pretty good. This week's winner is Andy Kluber of Terre Haute, Indiana. Andy, you just won a stylish Autoline t-shirt and hat ensemble, perfect for a day at the beach or a night on the town. Anyway, that's it for today's show. As always, from all of us here at Autoline Daily, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Visit our website for even more great content all week long. Autoline Extra, Dawn's Journal, podcasts, and even more. So click over and get the inside view at AutolineDetroit.tv.